So sure, we have a new government in the UK. The Labour Party won with a massive landslide. They've now had to basically do all their washing up. What's the future going to look like? So, a whole set of clean clothes. One aspect of that is the SDSR. Is it Security, Strategic Defence and Security Review? Presumably no, or is it just defence?
It's just been announced as just defence,
Okay.
But whether or not it will be security, wait to see.
So how do the politicians? What are their options when they think about this and think about the tactics? What are their options as they actually go into it?
You and I are both old enough now to have seen a few of these through, and at the risk of sounding gloriously simplistic, what they're meant to be about is a review of the global landscape, the threats that are out there, Britain's place in the world, and what we need to do what's the number one priority of any government, which is the protection of our people. What do we need to do, and how much is that going to cost? And that's what the Defence Review bluntly is about. What are the threats facing our nation? What capabilities does our nation need to ensure the safety, not today, not tomorrow, but for the next 10 years and beyond? What's the cost of that? Gulp. That's what defence reviews are meant to be. And that's what all the political language is about. Unfortunately, history suggests that the other way of doing them is actually behind closed doors saying, the answer is 2.5%. Here's how much money. What can we do for that amount of money?
Yeah.
So that, the classic term, vision without funding is hallucination. It doesn't matter what you want to do. If you haven't got the money to do it, what's the point in creating all of these dreams about where the defence should go? The language is all pointing towards the former. What do we need to protect ourselves in the future world? My scepticism is that actually the answer is 2.5%. Now fill in the gaps in between. And that really worries me.
So it's a bit like the politicians saying to the military, go off and design our new defence capability, and they come back with the answer and they go, no, I don't quite like it, Okay, we'll go back and do another one. They come back a second time, then a third time. Then in the end, the defence guys go, well, I'll tell you what, you just do it, because you seem to have an idea what you want. It's that type of thing.
Yeah, because, certainly each time I've seen the iteration of this, if you only left it to the military, and it's not being left to the military, but if you only left it to the military, the Royal Air Force, the Royal Navy, the British Army would all want more tanks, more ships, more aeroplanes. And bluntly, dealing with a threat like Russia, you could deal with it using the Air Force, you could deal with just with the Army, you could do it just with the Navy. I'm being flippant for effect, but actually, what's the right blend of those three services to create the most cost-effective capability? And that can't be done by each of the services. That has to be a blend. And therefore, this particular defence review, John Healey announced, I was privileged enough to get a bit of a briefing directly from John Healey.
And we want this to be Britain's defence review, unlike the previous defence reviews we've seen. So the reviewers will brief and consult and invite contributions from other political parties, from the armed forces, from civilians involved in defence right across the piece, including industry and academia.
He's appointed Lord Robertson to run it. He was a former
NATO.
Secretary NATO. He's also done one of the defence reviews back in 1998, so he knows how the process works. He's got General Richard Barrons, who's a former four-star Army chief, helping him. And Fiona Hill, that's a US military advisor. I can only assume that's because with America as being our key strategic partner, playing off that relationship, I think, will be the challenge. I think, unfortunately, two things that worry me, one of which is it'll take at least a year to do this review and then at least a year to implement it. 2 years. Do we have 2 years at the moment? And sceptically, from a political perspective, you're halfway towards the next general election by then. So you're just buying yourself some time. And the other thing that slightly concerns me is that I'm a veteran of the Cold War, where we were spending 4, 5, 6% of GDP at times. It feels like we've returned to that more dangerous world, that this sabbatical, 30 years of peace dividend that we've enjoyed was great, but it's over. And we used to have at Barkston Heath, just down the road from where I was training, we had big Bloodhound missile systems that were ready to point at the enemy. We don't have any of that stuff today. We don't feel protected in the way that we were in the Cold War. And it feels like that seems to be the direction of travel that we really should be going. And that may end up with a big bill. And the question then is, which you and I discuss a little bit offline, is as a military guy, I'd be saying, surely if that's the number one priority, you've got to spend money on that and take difficult choices elsewhere. Whereas there's a different view, isn't there?
Well, I think for me, it all boils down to one thing. And that one thing is, what is the first objective of every politician?
Get re-elected.
Re-elected. And unless bombs are landing in your street, it's generally quite hard to get votes from defence. What votes do you get? I mean, everybody will say we want to support Ukraine, or a lot of people will. But when it's, well, we're going to do that, but when you get to the end of the month, we're going to have to cut your social security. Well, I don't like that. So I think, yeah, you could argue the ultimate role of the government is the protection of its own nation and its own borders. But actually, when you've got up to 10 million people economically inactive, the social security bill is vast. And this is about people getting through to the end of the month without stealing something from next month to pay for a few days of fuel or food. So I think it's quite tricky for the Labour Party to work out how to handle that, because the more money they spend on defence doesn't mean more votes. And they want to go into the next election. You've said it's starting to butt up against the beginning of the campaigning season. Well, they might have been better off spending that money on something else, which will actually get votes from. So for the Labour Party, it's going to be tricky, actually.
It is, and I do wonder. I think it's one of the things we're going to touch on a fair bit over the coming year. I think because I think there'll be a lot of political focus on trying to do small steps. How can we do stuff to try to demonstrate that we're taking defence seriously while still delivering on all these other things? And I get that. The trouble is, history shows that if you're not well prepared for a conflict, then you invite a conflict. The great thing about being strong and having a robust military capability is you deter a potential adversary because they know you're ready. If they know you're not ready, then actually it encourages people to have a go.
Yes, that's true. And I wonder, there's quite a few steps between Russia and the UK, other countries. And being an island as well, I wonder whether people are always tempted to feel we're a lot safer than everybody else.
Yeah, and you're playing back now to the late 1930s, aren't you? Which was it won't be us, we'll appease, Hitler. And then, sure enough, the war came to our shores and it became a lot more difficult to deal with it. A lot of historians suggest that if we dealt with it a lot earlier, it would have been a lot easier to sort out. We didn't, and as a result of not doing that, it became incredibly painful, and millions and millions, tens of millions of lives were lost as a result.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is everybody in the whole Labour Party, the extreme left, the middle left, the sort of centre ground, of which there's, a complete spectrum, as there is in probably most parties, but they all kept quiet. They all played the line. They didn't really answer any questions. They were coached. I mean, as a campaign, I thought it was absolutely brilliant from that point of view. They never really answered any question directly because they didn't need to. It was clear they were going to win. Now they've won. All those other factions will come out of the woodwork. And of course, the heart of the left in the Labour Party is anti-war. Significant anti-war. And don't forget, in both of Corbyn's elections as Labour leader, which he lost, he got many, many more votes, actual votes, than Keir Starmer did in winning. So he's got a power base, both in the country and in the party. This will come out as well.
No, I agree.
Keir Starmer's going to have to manage all of that.
No, I think it's, and that's why we're going to cover it, because I think, again, it's terms like anti-war I'm an ex-military guy. I'm absolutely anti-war.
Yeah, sure.
I've seen the impact
Yeah.
of what
You're
war does.
sort of supporting defending yourself, though.
No, people say, "Oh, you're a military." Some of the trolls out there call us warmongers. And you go, really? If you've ever served in the military and been on operations, you're quite the opposite. The reason you're in the military is because you stand proud on the line and you are a credible deterrence to our nation's enemies. You failed if you actually have to go and fight because, bluntly, you've not deterred them well enough. And that's why we have a professional armed forces that are there to be at the tip of the sword, to be a credible deterrence against our nation's enemies. And the danger is none of us are pro-war, but war has a horrible habit of coming to your door. And if you're not ready for it, you pay a much higher price for it. And I think that's, there's a lovely quote, isn't there? People who don't study history are destined to make the same mistakes. And I think there's a lot of history around this that I think we'd be wise to observe.
Absolutely right. And one more thing came out of the King's speech. This is the way of the government announcing its plans for the next period. And that was Keir Starmer's saying, or King Charles saying on his behalf, my government are going to do everything in their power to get Ukraine into NATO.
Yeah, and as we've discussed before, I'm a bit nervous about that because if you're going to negotiate some form of cessation of hostilities, one of the things that Russia's going to want is Ukraine not being a member of NATO.
Yeah.
So to take that off the table, I think is potentially dangerous. Before we wrap up today,
Yes.
need to tell our audience we won't be back next week. One of the reasons is because one of us is taking a bit of a lasted break. In fact,
Going on holiday.
Yeah, sort of holiday. Congratulations to Bern, though. Gets married on Saturday.
Thank you very much.
Massive congratulations and enjoy the break. We'll look forward to a resumption of the Red Matrix podcast on your return.
Thank you very much. And you are going to be there, and you are going to be...
Yeah, master of ceremonies, shouting everybody around. So God knows how that's going to go. No, massive congratulations, Bern. Really looking forward to it.
Thank you very much.